Hey, everybody. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Great to be with you again today. Just a quick little note. If you ever miss the Plant-Based Business Hour, you can also subscribe right now. Subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts, and then you will make sure to never miss it. Something I don't want to miss. That's how I want to get right into our conversation today. I have with me the former North American president of Unilver. He jumped ship to go plant-based. He's now the CEO and chairman of the LIVEKINDLY Collective. I want to bring in Kees Kruythoff. Kees, thanks for joining me.
Fantastic. Great to be here.
So even though you spell your name Kees, it's Kees, yes?
It is actually, that's the way you say it. As my wife always said, you say it like suitcase better than nutcase. But anyway, it
depends on the day.
Exactly, it depends on the day. I was once interviewed in New York, and they said that's a funny name, and I said, well, it's a very local name because it's linked to the Yankees, and so very local New York name.
But you are no longer in New York, of course, because you're no longer North American president of Unilver. You are now back in your native Holland. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes, lovely Holland. And you are, of course, as I said in the beginning, chairman and CEO of the LIVEKINDLY Collective. For those who may not know, the LIVEKINDLY Collective is a basket of 5 plant-based companies, the LIVEKINDLY magazine, of course, which we all know, No Meat, Oomph, Like Meat, and Fries. Tell me briefly, why did you leave Unilver after something like 27 years, I think, and you decided to jump ship and go plant-based?
You know, there were many stories to tell around that. The first one is that Unilver was absolutely a fantastic journey. 27 years. I worked in all the continents around the world, from the Netherlands to South Africa, Singapore to China, back to South Africa, Brazil, New York, and then into London. So incredible journey, which I have actually understood the global food system and being and understanding what it is to serve consumers and customers all around the world. And, that is the first thing. The second one is in Unilver, we created something called the Unilver Sustainable Living Plan. It was really about being there as a business, as a force for good. And so I got really excited about, how can we truly, as a business, have a positive impact to society. And then, when after 27 years, I did not become the global CEO of Unilver. And so then I thought, what am I going to do next? And so I had 6 months of a sabbatical. And as my mother has always said to me, put your talents actually at service to society, and at the same time, maximize all the talents which you have. And so in 6 months of sabbatical, that was a good moment to think about what to do next. And obviously, when you think about my biggest passion, my best expertise, and what the world needs most, came all together into really starting and being part of the global transformation from an animal to a plant-based food system.
Yeah, I love what you say here. I call this in my own life the bingo effect. So when my skill set meets my passion, it's like I've won the lottery. And I am larger than life. I feel that I'm working at 125% of my potential when my skill set meets my passion. Whereas when I'm doing things that don't really meet my passion, I'm kind of working at like a 75% capacity, because it just, emboldens me so much. And you and I have a similar energy. So I see that the same is true with you.
We call it your superpower, right?
Yes.
And actually, I think is that there's 3 angles in this. Actually, is that your skill set and your passion actually merges to the third element of this, and that is what the world's biggest hunger is, and so what the world needs most. And then you actually create all 3 of these dimensions, and you connect them.
You're 100% right. When you start solving some of the world's most pressing issues, which we're doing here today, you really feel like, oh my gosh, that sense of purpose overcomes any obstacle you might have in your life. I always say, like, oh gosh, I feel sorry for all the people who aren't working in the plant-based industry, because if you're not working in the plant-based industry, it is negative news on a global scale every day, except for us. It's positive news for us every day. Maybe you can share with us the vision for LIVEKINDLY, because I don't want to say that it came out of nowhere, but suddenly last year, and happy anniversary, you just celebrated a year. The LIVEKINDLY Collective just celebrated, as of March of 2021, a year anniversary. Tell us where you're going with these 5 brands. And I I think I heard these 5 brands and your stake in Purus. And then I think I heard that you might be coming to the United States at some point. So share your vision, please.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. And indeed, it has been an unbelievable start because basically what we have said, we want to become the global preeminent plant-based food company. And we want to be leading in the movement to make plant-based living the new norm. And so the vision really starts with you go to 2040 and you fold the future back in and you basically think about the year 2040. And the big question is what everybody is asking, why on earth were we ever eating animals? Yeah. And so that is basically, I always compare it to, 1888, slavery was abolished. The last country in the world was in Brazil. And now we look at that and said, what were we thinking? What were they thinking, I should say? And I'm absolutely determined and convinced is that we will create the same thing. And so this is, what our contribution and what we want to help to be able to lead that movement of making plant-based living the new norm. We started with this first by obviously getting the fundraise right, because at the end, that is a necessity to start off with. But you immediately felt, the unbelievable movement which was there. And so within 12 months, we had $535 million fundraised, which is actually the biggest ever in such a short notice fundraise in the global food industry. And so with that, we could really start our mission and our vision. And so we have a unique model. And our unique model is actually to put founders, entrepreneurs, and global leaders together. And so with the 5 acquisitions which we did, it's not an acquisition actually. What we did is we create a platform where people basically say and choose they want to be part of it. Because if you are a relative small plant-based food company, and is that there's something about, the end of your capability or making the impact. If you become part of a larger part, you get an absolutely accelerator of your impact. And so what we actually put together is expertise, experience, and credibility in plant-based. With these 5 companies, we have 75 years of experience already together. And we put that together with people like me who have had a global experience and expertise, what it is to do and run businesses of multi-billion businesses in China or in the US or in South Africa or in Europe or in Brazil. And actually you combine that and you create magic, because that is the total accelerator of actually this all coming together.
I love what you say here. So you've got the expertise of so many people. And so many brands, do they work together sometimes? So like, does Fries help out for any of that kind of
absolutely
overlap? Oh, that's right.
And that is the unique thing. Yeah. And by the way, it's also the biggest challenge which we have, because you can imagine how these different cultures and different skills are coming together. And we call it the third way, because we all need to unlearn and learn things to be able to create this new culture around Live Kindly, a collective culture, where our values are about kind, about mindful and bold. And so to be able to put that together is an absolute critical part, but it's also where the magic sits. And to your question is what we are doing. We are actually integrating these businesses so that you get into different countries. Take Germany as an example, where Like Meat started. We are actually there having a management team for the country, where actually all of the brands, so Like Meat, but also and Fries and all the brands, are being then, as a go-to-market part, are being marketed in that country. And so we are one integrated business, and that is how we are actually built it. But the unique thing is, if you put together the R&D from our Fries, which is 29 years of experience, together with the R&D of for 20 years and 10 years of Like Meat and the likes. Once you put that together, you learn from each other, and you really get exponential learning by putting that together. So that is basically how the model works.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I hadn't realized that in addition to being experts for one another, they're also serving, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but perhaps distribution opportunities, not really distribution channels, because Oomph probably doesn't take fries and sells it in Sweden, but there's that opportunity to open those connections. Do I have that right?
It's actually one step further integrated, and so basically we had a like meet in Germany, and now the team in Germany, the LIVEKINDLY Collective team in Germany, is now also launching Oomph in Germany.
I see.
And so
Okay.
that is the way that we're doing it. And to your point, our strategy is first to accelerate our core in these countries, whether it's Germany or whether it is the Nordics, UK, or South Africa or Australia. But now we're going to go to the next countries, of which the US and China are the priority countries. So we just launched very small. We started in Sprouts in the US, but with both like meat and with Fry's Family. And we're launching in China on June the 25th. And so these are the next countries which we are really now developing in, where we go from accelerating to core towards the next countries. And then the third pillar is that we will continue to do more acquisition. And for us, acquisitions is that we are like a magnet. There's many of the plant-based food companies who actually say, wow, I really get and understand what they want to do with this collective. And I actually choose to be part of that collective. So people come to us and say, why can I basically join? Which is in the financial language is called an acquisition. Yes. But basically it is joining the collective, and hashtag stronger together. Together we can have disproportionate impact on the mission, which we're all on together. And that is what we call the movement.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Let's dive into that a little bit, because when you say brands come to you because they see the power in numbers, of course, and the exponential potential therein, you also have to choose them. And so what are you looking for when you acquire a brand into LIVEKINDLY Collective?
It's several parts. The first one is that people need to really understand and buy in and want to be part of this culture and of this collective. And if that feels good emotionally, that is probably the most important thing for founders. These founders, and I have worked with many founders in my previous life and in my current life. They basically, if they really understand, why they want to join, i.e., what I always say, you gain a lot and you lose a little because you're not only stand alone anymore, but if that is part of the bigger vision, so that their mission can be accelerated and continued, that is the most important part of joining. Of course, what also is the case is that many companies in the plant-based industry are all doing the same thing. You need to fundraise, you go to customers, you buy Buller machines for extrusion. And so look at how many people are doing the same thing. And so there's lots of inefficiency. If there's one big worry in my life about, real impact, is that you get hundreds of relative small companies all doing the same thing with not the maximum impact. And so in my view, this is where if we consolidate those efforts, we will have a much bigger impact into it. And so that is basically the second thought in it. Then the third one is, you look at what are the different criteria. And we have lots of experience in M&A in the past as well. And M&A discipline is critically important. But the criteria are things like, geographic expansion is one of them, or, unique R&D, or unique talent, or a unique brand positioning, which really fits into the brand portfolio. So there's different lenses which actually drive that. So all in all, lots of opportunities in an emerging industry, which is just at the beginning of its journey. We're still super, super, super small, and the opportunity for impact is, as we've always said, by 2040, we believe is that the industry only on plant-based alternative meat will be like 450 billion in size. So that is 3 times the global beer market. So, we should always remember in which phase of the industry development we are in.
Yeah, so much to unpack there. I'm going to try to remember it all. There's a lot I really do want to go over here. And of course, we're going to get to 2040. Of course, we will get to that. But as you talk about bringing in brands and the 3 pillars that are important to you, of course, the 3rd pillar makes a lot of sense. You're looking for a skill set or an attribute that you don't already have that you can add to the collective so that you can make the entire collective stronger, better, and more efficient. In this way, I think of you as competing against not other plant-based brands, obviously, or even individual meat and dairy brands, but I see you competing against the Unilevers of the world or the big corporations, JBS, et cetera. When you look at somebody like JBS that just acquired Vivera, they also have Plantera. What do you think about these big meat and dairy companies coming into the space?
Yeah, let me first start by saying that everybody who pushes the same movement, we are happy with. And, if you think about the totality of the meat industry, which is obviously having such an unbelievable, disastrous impact on, the devastated land and, obviously the animal welfare issues and, all of our diets and the human health. And so every part where we and the bigger we in this sense move from animal to plant, we will celebrate that. And so whether that is incumbents of meat who are transforming themselves or who partner with us to be able to transform, that is all part of the movement. So we really like that. That is why we always say, is that the Unilevers and the Nestle's and everybody who does plant-based or Beyond and Impossible and everybody in there, we are all really, really, in my view, part of the same movement, and we are just celebrating that. So that's the first point. The second point is that we really believe is that our biggest competitor is the meat industry, and that we will help them to transform, or otherwise we will compete. And in my view, if you look at the dairy industry, if you have businesses who have a big revenue, small gross margin, and a sizable fixed cost, they are all basically, if 15% of the consumers, even if that's just the younger consumers, if they shift, all of these companies are basically indirectly already bankrupt. And so they need to make a plan. And so if their plan is to be part and redefine their business from poultry to protein, we are very happy with that. And so that is also why, for example, in Europe, we partner with PHW, which is a poultry business. We partner in South Africa with RCL Foods, which is a broad-based food business, but they also have poultry. And they are actually incumbents, and they are super keen to be able to transform themselves and are actually part of our mission. And if it is part of that, then we really love that.
Yeah, they're going to have to adapt or die because they don't have the resources on their side. Land and water just aren't going to be available as we go from 7.6 billion people to 9.8 billion people on the planet. That's from the UN. So they don't really have a choice. In addition, they're wildly inefficient businesses, wildly inefficient models, not just for land and water, but also time and just you don't need the middleman being the animal from the grains, which have fiber and protein. You don't need to give them to animals and then wait and then give them water and give them more time and then grow more grains. By the way, you're cutting down trees to do that. Oh, we need those trees to sequester carbon, but okay, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to grow more grains and give them to animals, which we could be giving to people. So very inefficient models. And you see the likes of, let's say, Tyson, which just came out with Raised and Rooted, which used to be a blended plant-based meat product. And now they've revamped it to be completely vegan. And I see that they're doing this, and I, like you, applaud them. And at the same time, they're opening a large chicken plant, a new one, something they haven't done in 25 years. So I think the meat industry, I see it, doesn't get all the publicity in the plant-based world. But meanwhile, the meat industry is doubling down on chicken. So it's very disturbing to me to see that, and to see sort of the Tyson kind of have one foot in both camp, and they're just going to do whatever sells most fastest. I don't know. Your perspective, please.
No, I think my perspective on this, it all depends about leadership, whether you have courageous leadership and whether you have authentic leadership. And so if you are a CEO of a business like that, and, you really need to do two things. You need to optimize the current system, but actually create the next model already. And if you truly believe is that you want to actually over time become truly a plant-based industry because that model is superior and because you truly believe in that mission, that is a different thing than to opportunistically being part, as you say, with your foot in two sides. And so at the end, it all becomes, what leadership and authentic leadership is truly all about. And so what we need to understand, and this is all the theory of change, is around business as a force for good.
Yes.
And so if people start to understand is that the relevance, performance, and impact to society are actually one and the same thing, suddenly you see is that, this plant-based industry is very clearly from all angles, absolutely the way to go.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that becomes clear to some authentic leaders. Maybe I should rephrase that and say, I'm hoping that there are more and more authentic leaders taking the high position of CEO, et cetera, to guide these companies, because we all need their distribution channels and we also all need their advertising budget. So I agree with you in that I'm very happy to collaborate. I just want that collaboration to not squash what is that superpower that we all have, that passion in the small business entrepreneur. Usually it used to be that it was really the big giants that made all the difference. And now you're seeing we're in the era of David, and it's the David that all the consumers want to follow, not the Goliath. And so I don't want to squash that entrepreneurial spirit.
No, I think, we're living in a phase is that the millennials and the Gen Z, we're just blessed with this generation. Yes. It's obviously 100% digital. We talk about transparency and trust in transparency. You see is that trust levels in society. You look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, it's on the lowest part. But you also see is that actually where the trust starts to become is into authentic leadership, also into business, which really drives the next generation of how we want to do business. And if and when we get business as a force for good, that is unstoppable, because at the end, that also means is that governments will start to put true cost into the system. That you see is that NGOs will help to accelerate, and these are all flywheels. And ultimately, the consciousness of the world also has increased again with this COVID, with the pandemic. And so ultimately, these elements are unstoppable. What our job is that actually it's not about the trend. It is about that climate change and inequality, it's not about progress, but it is actually at scale, at speed, what it requires. And that is basically the critical element here.
What do you mean at scale and at speed that is required?
At the end, we are still only... Sorry.
Bless you. How do I say bless you in Dutch?
Yeah, bless you, actually.
Okay.
I was trying to find the mute button here. But anyway, so apologies about that. No, what the point is if you think about 7.7 billion, as you say, going to 9.8 billion. If you look at, all the trends, that is absolutely a way which is unsustainable. And, we talk about that for a long time, but now really, capital starts to understand that, government starts to understand it. Look what's happening, with all the governments and talking about net positive, the biggest companies in the world, like Walmart, all of them are starting to get into it. And so that is good, because that actually talks about commitment. to 2060, 2050, if 2040. But the point is not about doing it. The point is about, how fast and with which impact it goes. And that's the same with the plant-based industry, because, if we have the current trend, as fast as this is growing, it is actually growing fast on a very small base still. And we are celebrating obviously Oatly today again, but it's 400 million as a business. It's a great business, and 400 million. And so the point is that the industry needs to really be able to get to impact. It needs to get to scale, and it needs to rapidly get into scale, because at the moment, every day and again, we're getting the negative impact in climate, on animal welfare, and on our human health. Every day is that we are not shifting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Godspeed, basically, no time to lose. One of the things I tell my clients, I have a consulting firm, Plant Powered Consulting, and I work with them on messaging, is I worry that with so many companies using the word plant-based, and then is that a blended product? Is that plants only? Meat had taken some blended products and called them plant-based. So I worry that, plant-based is being used left and right and almost doesn't mean anything anymore. And so I'm always telling my brands, you need to really figure out that unique conversation you're having with the consumer base, because lucky us, there's not just one person who's plant-based anymore. It's growing so quickly, that flexitarian market. Are you talking to the young person who's taking a political stand? Are you talking to the older person who's doing it for their health? Are you talking to the person who's, just starting to figure out, this is something new, I want to try it in my diet, I'm going to do it 2-3 times a week, I'm going to see how my kids like it, all these kind of individual consumer target markets. And you really can't get away with one blanket statement anymore. You have to make that unique, creative conversation between you and your consumer market, so that you develop that loyalty, so that this doesn't become something that I think big meat and dairy could come in and squash if they wanted to.
So absolutely, I love what you've just said. And basically in marketing terms, we talk about the segmentation and the differentiation of the marketplace linked to unique consumer need states.
Yes.
And so that is basically what you've just talked about. And that is also part of the LIVEKINDLY Collective, because the collective of brands we have are actually all differentiated positionings, delivering different consumers and the different consumer need states. So if you think about it, Fry's family is actually, it talks about from our family to all of your families, and it is about the family classics as being, a family as a force for good. Then, if you go towards like meat, it is so it's good, so good, because actually what it is for mindful meat lovers. And so it is the meat lover, but they are mindful in there. And so that is absolutely, at the proposition about double pleasure. You get the absolute pleasure of the best tasting plant-based meat, but it's also still, at the real meat experience. Then you have oomph, which is what the brand name says. It spices up your life. It is about international flavors. It is a very different consumer who's looking for this oomph in life, and the oomph in food, and the oomph in plant-based. And then you have no meat, which basically talks about affordable protein for all. And so we should not only have premium priced, but actually also affordable plant-based food, which basically is what the positioning of no meat is about. So what you've just said is so critical, because we're getting into a phase where the market actually the basis, and this is a point of difference and a point of parity. Everybody in plant-based actually is obviously better for the planet, better for the animals, and the likes. But you need to cater to the individual need states of consumers, and that is basically what our portfolio is all about. And that's why we're so excited to be launching in the US with the family brand, Fry's Family, and with the best in chicken, which is not only plant-based chicken, but it is also 100% organic, vegan, and so you have a double pivot also, because it is basically a real clean, natural ingredients which we will put in. So exactly to what you say is what we hope to do with this beautiful portfolio of brands.
Yeah. And I love that Oomph is going for that global traveler, maybe that person, the spice of life, as well as the spice on their plate. I love that differentiation. And, you know, like I said earlier, I'm just thrilled that Like Meat is there with chicken. And I know Fry's Family Food also does chicken, but we need to move beyond the burger and the sausage. So, you know, and I'd love, of course, that No Meat is saying protein for all. That's obviously food insecurity. We can talk about that too, as we talk about, you know, the shifting food supply system and how we're going to feed all these people. So, and we saw that during COVID, how the first things to stop was the job market and the food supply system. So obviously we're hanging on by a thread here. So that's a very important topic, but I am focused on chicken of late. So I'm really happy to see Like Meat do that, and that it's coming to the US in Sprouts. Yes?
Yeah, it is already there actually.
Get it.
And go get it, because it's flying, and it really is as of a great start. Both Fry's Family and Like Meat in Sprouts. And now we are rolling it into soon into the different customers in America.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I have a quote from you, and I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit. So I think it was called Green Zone. Oh, shoot, was the magazine. What you're saying about the global shifting food supply system, what you need to do in a young industry is create total systems change. What do you mean?
You know, if you look at the current industry and the food industry, it has been created over the last hundreds of years, and it is basically in their totally optimized and efficiency what has been created, and that is all the elements in there, whether it is in the subsidies or whether it is in the totality of the customer, or it is the supply chain. And so that system is a hugely efficient, optimized system. To be able to get towards a total next system, you need to disrupt the old system, but you need to put a better system in place. And that is hard work, because in the beginning you have diseconomies of scale. You need to really get the cost in there to be able to invest, to build capacity and capability, to invest in terms of awareness and trial and repeat in consumers. And so the total system has to shift. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it's important to be able to, with a force, shift the total system. That is why we are so happy, is that the global players and the pure players are in there, and we see ourselves as a global pure play. And as a total, you really then start to shift all the way upstream. So farmers start to understand, is that their dairy farm start to become unsustainable, and there's a better alternative for that. So that is basically all the way upstream to the farmers, but also all the way downstream into, where customers like Target and Walmart understand that, this is an attractive market, that this really is tiny still, but that it has the opportunity to be able to really serve their shoppers better, and is that there is ultimately a better economic system for it. And that is when you really get the acceleration of the total system shift.
Yeah, I'll even take that one step further. I'll say that you need it upstream even further. So if you're talking about growing more vegetables so that you can have quality soil and not monocropping, then you're talking about different machinery, because you're no longer just picking corn. You're picking corn, eggplant, potatoes. So now you need different machinery. And before you can do that, you need a different banking system. You need support from the banking system to say, okay, we're going to go with non-organics, because usually they only want to see we're going to go with organics. Usually they want to see chemicals so that they can get a return on their investment, be assured that the crop is going to exist, et cetera. So you, from the very, very beginning, it is a overhaul of absolutely everything all the way down to the end consumer.
And the good thing about this is that people start to see that and understand it. So we have one of our investors is the Rabobank. And so, talking about the financial system starting to we are building together with the Rabobank the carbon bank, which actually then says, once we sequester, because we are planting with Puris in our joint venture, we are planting the yellow pea seeds in South Africa, and we obviously they're capturing our carbon, and we're putting that into a carbon bank. Then we are talking with customers like Nando's and Tesco's and ICA and different, to be able to say, we're not only selling plant-based peri-peri chicken to Nando's, but actually also we help them to be able to get them to net positive. And so you really create, total system change and a closed loop in that. And to your point, that goes all the way into the associated systems which are linked to it. I was in South Africa lately, talking to the farmers, and they start to talk about this as green gold. That is basically what they talk about it, because these yellow peas, they grow. And literally, I was there after 54 days. It went from an almost deserted soil into an absolute total versatile soil, where the nitrogen is back into the soil. And then, as you say, you need to you rotate the crops even for a higher and better sequestering of the soil. So this is why we make we give better protein for all, and at the same time, we're helping to get a better versatility for the soil. And obviously, in the meantime, we don't do any harm to those who are always the weakest, as we call it. Climate change and inequality. The inequality is always those who are the weakest, don't have a voice. And so we make sure is that the planet and the animals have a voice in this system.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. Can you imagine the resilience of the planet to come back after 54 days
Absolutely.
with nitrogen in the soil? It's just unbelievable. Yeah. And you, of course, address animal welfare here. Thank you so much. And I will add to that, those who go hungry the most are those who work in the food supply system. So it is an unbalanced, unequal, unsustainable system that needs to change from the ground up, the top bottom from the bottom up, as we've been saying. But a lot of that change comes from scalability, as we're talking about changing the whole system. And a lot of that has to do with price. You're not really going to get to the numbers that we saw in the recent Boston Consulting Group study, which was paid for in part by Blue Horizons Corporation. You're not going to see the numbers that they're talking about, which is 290 billion by 2035. This is even better than the numbers that A.T. Kearney was talking about. It was a joy to read that article until you really deal with price. So I know it's just a question of scale and time, but I wonder if you'd like to comment on that at all.
No, I think scale and time is part of that. But we need to understand is that, to your point, when you skip a step in the total value chain, you have fundamentally a lower cost base. And so, yes, scale and time are important, but the good thing is that the fundamental system is better. The second one is that, as we just talked about, true cost is a double pivot, because, at the moment you get subsidies in the meat and in the dairy industry, whilst if you could put true cost, the subsidies would go and you get taxes in there. Whilst you basically get real carbon benefits and subsidies in the plant-based. So you have a double shift. So the first point for consumers is that the relative price will shift completely, and the second one is that the absolute price has the opportunity to shift. And what we were talking about is very, very important to think about. India, China, Africa, Brazil, emerging markets, but also in the US, the protein and the quality protein of, where currently people have low or no quality of protein. It's absolutely shocking. And so this is all where we need to go. We are launching now, which is a 30% price premium against organic chicken. So, it's still expensive, but at least, we are moving. we're moving towards a better reality. But our vision is very, very clear, and that is that we need to get better protein for all.
Yeah. And as we're talking about sort of Godspeed, no time to waste here, because you have the opportunity to capture markets like China and India, which currently are basically pushing the consumption of global meat up because it has that cool factor from the West, if you will. But you could get in there early enough to really change that perspective. David Young, I'm sure you know him, Omnipork, he's been on this show, and he always says, we have to outcool meat and dairy. And you particularly, and he's talking about the markets of China particularly, and you have that opportunity to get in there early enough before they really cement this ritual of bad habits.
No, I totally agree. And I always talk about the protein transformation is inherently just after the digital transformation. And of course, the digital transformation is one of the biggest impacts, and the fourth industrial revolution and all that. And what you will see is you will have the same leapfrog if we do it well in protein, because you go from no to low protein, not through the middle class adapting habits around meat and then go to plant-based, but actually from no phone, not via landline to mobile phone, but actually leapfrog from no phone to the mobile phone. And we have the opportunity to do this. So I'm totally aligned with David Young to say you need to make sure is that is actually the real cool thing next. It used to be cool to go from no phone to a landline, and then to a mobile. Actually, now that is obviously at the middle class is a joke. So you need to reframe, and that reframing is that you go from no to low protein directly to good quality protein, which obviously is plant-based.
Yeah, and someone else that you also know, Walter Robb, who's the former co-CEO of Whole Foods, and I know you sit on the board with him, but he was saying on this show that he expects the plant-based business to get to be 500 billion, and that in his 40 years of working in grocery stores, this is even a faster change than the entire tech mobile transformation. So it's fun to have him on this show. And I always tell people, if you have any doubt in plant-based, then I highly recommend you go invest in a landline. Or go invest in a typewriter while you're at it. I mean, who would ever today go and use a typewriter? We have something called the computer. It is so much more efficient. You would never go backwards. And that's what meat and dairy is for us. It's just too efficient to even talk about in our global food supply system. Unless
I will just build on Walter Robb. Together with John Mackey, these guys have obviously been absolutely visionaries and have really been at the heart of changing the food system in America. And we are blessed to have him on the board. And every time is that we have board meetings on LIVEKINDLY Collective, he always drives the same point, increase and driving up the standards every time that you have an opportunity to do that, because that actually will increase the total system to drive standards up. And it's a very big thought. And that is, really what is happening. And we are blessed. We are blessed with an unbelievable board. So Walter is one of them, but we also have Chinese investors and board member, and that is again a total ecosystem which we will get support on. And to your earlier point, this is not to put Western food and habits into that system, but actually to make plant-based what is a part of the local Chinese eating. And we always talk about make it China for China, and at China speed is absolutely critical.
Yes. And you would think if you were the government of China, and I do believe that they're working on this, you would look at the West and you would say, well, I don't want those health costs, because you can see how expensive it is when you have people with heart disease, diabetes, colorectal cancer, et cetera. And, they continue to battle African swine fever, Asian bird flu. They've never been able to get a handle on Asian bird flu. We haven't either, quite frankly. And there's nothing, by the way, folks, to say that you can only have one pandemic. We may be ending this pandemic, we may not, or we may have another pandemic in tandem. So you look at these kind of healthcare costs, and you have to think, if you're China trying to feed 1.4 billion people, that you have to find a more efficient and a safer food supply. Because from a political standpoint, I always talk about sort of veg tech as an issue of national security, veg tech being the innovation that we have behind plant-based foods and cellular foods. You have no leg to stand on without food and water from a political standpoint in the future.
No, absolutely. And I must say, I lived in China in the early 2000s and in Shanghai. And, so we do know a little bit about the food industry and the consumers in China. And, I think the current government is very clear, about what and where. And so in the last 5-year plan, you already see is that the green economy starts to be in. You've seen the commitment to 2060 net positive, and so this is really on the agenda. To your point, one of the bigger things is obviously air pollution, which they need to do for the quality of life and the population. The other one is about food security. And the pork prices and the pork has been pork stock has been never on a lower level than ever in the history now. And so that means is that there needs to be a real alternative system for food security. And that is why I believe is that very clearly, we will get a real good support there. And once it's in a 5-year plan, things happen in China.
Yeah. I love what you say, because China has the ability to say no more cars unless they're electric, and then all of a sudden that's
So you've seen the scooters. You've seen the scooters change in Shanghai, literally within 6 months, all from petroleum into electric in 6 months.
Yeah. So I anticipate you're going to see the same with plant-based, because it behooves them from a global political standpoint. And also, if you want political security, you have to feed your own people or they get upset. So no real solution other than that for them. However, Europe is dragging its feet. So explain to me what's going on with Amendment 171. And I'm just baffled that Europe could be, unless I've misunderstood the situation, Kees, you'll set me straight here. They were supportive generally of plant-based meats, and that they were allowing, let's say, generally a competitive landscape to take place. And then they came down very hard on plant-based dairy, not even allowing, I think, milk cartons to be shown, because the cartons are like milk. Please help us out here. What's going on?
Look, it's confusing. Firstly, it's very confusing for me. Let's start by why the legislation needs to be there, and that is to avoid consumer consumer confusion. Well, the main part is that there is absolutely no consumer confusion the way it has been stacked in the stores, and there is not one consumer who has a real issue with it. So I think this is definitely, to your point, a big surprise. Of course, it was good is that at least, in plant-based meat, we continue to have the ability to use the right descriptors there. And I only have one logic, and that is, is that the legacy industries are being protected once again. And so that's the only logic. When you talk to Timmermans and the EU Green Deal, I think things are moving into the right direction, but this was an absolute mistake and a real surprise. What is good in China is actually that in June 25th is that the descriptor, because in Mandarin actually you had the descriptor need to be in Mandarin man-made meat, which obviously is definitely not the way to sell your products.
No.
And the good thing there is that we're moving on June 25th, that you can talk about it as plant-based meat. So all in all, I do believe is that, things are moving into the right direction. We need to be careful, because in the US, some of the states also start to have discussions around it, which obviously is absolutely just lobby is in the space, because the most important thing is there consumer confusion or not? And just do consumer research. There is zero confusion for the consumer, and that is what governments need to protect.
Yeah, because it's very embarrassing for them, really, holding back the planet like this. It's ridiculous. And particularly in the United States, where you count yourself as being pro-business and then to give such an unlevel playing field, it's embarrassing, to say the least. Get with the program, folks. So a question for you before we then sort of head out to our quick questions. But my last kind of in-depth question, obviously, the Live Kindly Collective is in 100% for plant-based options. But what do you see the cell-based cultured meat market doing in the next, let's say, 20 years?
Look, in the next 20 years, I hope and I assume and we predict is that also will really get into exponential growth. And, that's all good because once again, what it does is actually takes the animal out of the food system, or at least, it limits it in a significant way. And the second one is that, you get not the negatives of the animal-based food system. The issue is that you also don't get the positives of the plant-based food system. And so in my view, you either get a double benefit or you get a single benefit. And that is why we as the Live Kindly Collective have chosen to be 100% focused on plant-based. So that's the first logic. The second logic is that, for consumers, this will take a little while, in my view, and I can be wrong, but I've been working in the food industry for many, many years. And if you talk about food technology, it needs to be predominantly food and then supported by technology. If you get technology too much and not enough food, then actually consumers start to reject it under Frankenstein food. And so therefore, the balance between food and technology is absolutely critical in our view. And what you have in plant-based, consumers intuitively get the power of plants. And that is something which is very, very important for, ultimately adoption into the system. And then, the benefits which you get is that it actually helps to regenerate our soil. That is a very emotional benefit. Consumers and farmers and land is very emotive for consumers. So I personally believe is that it is good. Everything where we go from animal towards non-animal based food system is positive. But I really believe is that the double pivot is more preferable, and is that the consumers ultimately is the ones who emotionally really would go and prefer the plant-based option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see them working in tandem. I mean, of course, once you have cellular agriculture, it is the end of animal agriculture. There's no point in there's just no reason one would ever do that. But I think there is going to be this time where it's hard for people to make that bridge. And then in the interim and for the long haul, they have plants, the beauty of plants. Exactly. We all love that. So sort of as we head towards the exit questions, sort of along those same lines, but much more specific, if you were going to make predictions, and I used to ask this question, 10 years out, then 5 years out, forget it. What do you see happening by the end of 2021? And included in that, or maybe in addition to that, is Live Kindly getting into any dairy?
So to the last question, to start there, is that basically over the next, strategic planning period, the answer is no. We will be focused on plant-based, and we will be focused on plant-based alternative meat as it currently stands. Strategy is also about choices, and we are very broad in many sense, and we need to be therefore very choiceful in other sense. So we're very broad because, we are in many countries, very differentiated countries around the world, with different dynamics, and therefore that is a complexity to manage. The second one is that we are broad because we go all the way from the seed to the farmers, all the way through to the consumers, to customers and consumers. And so that's the second broad part. And therefore we would need to focus in other parts. And so that is why we do plant-based meat specifically in there, and only plant-based as we just discussed. So these are elements. And why do we need to get that focus right? Because focus needs to go into to real impact, and impact is obviously where we hit our mission and the vision of the business. So that is where the logic sits around the second question. Then where do we end in 2021? I think this is obviously an accelerated growth, and if anything, the acceleration will be all about the adoption rate of consumers. The customers are all totally bought into it, and so I personally believe is that we will easily see doubling of this industry year over year over year, and then it really goes very, very rapidly when to get the scale in it. And once again, today is a day to celebrate with Oatly, and that just gets more voices into the system. And wow, what a success that has been. So I just want to say congratulations to the Oatly team. And again, we're all in this together.
Yeah, so beautiful. Go Oatly, go. Bjorn co-founder, was on this show as well. It's funny. Cargill was actually, I was in an interview with Cargill, and they actually were the ones who told me December of 2018, change is going to come and it's going to feel like it's happening from one day to the next. And I think what you're talking about, that sort of exponential growth, year over year, compounded growth, it's going to feel like, oh my God, almost in 1 year, you'll be able to say from a mindset like, wow, we used to eat animals. I mean, I think it's going to happen that quickly.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. Our founder, Roger Lienhart, and he's the founder of Blue Horizon.
Yes.
And also, which is the anchor investor for LIVEKINDLY Collective. We've always, he has always predicted this, that this is exactly the curve which will go on. And, 2021 in that sense could well be another tipping point year in this in this journey. And once again, the world is really asking for it, and is really ready for it.
Yeah. Again, Godspeed. Okay, a couple quickie extra questions. So you can't say plant-based, but what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Gee. If I am not allowed to say plant-based, I must say is that I did not know that the chicken was the most inefficient factory in the world.
I didn't either, because wait, flush that out for me, because most people say that chicken is the most efficient.
No, but the chicken itself is the animal, and so the protein, the protein waste which you have, because the protein goes through the step in between. And so I never knew is how inefficient, the factory called the chicken was.
Yes, I see what you're saying, that you could just get your protein directly from plants, and that how inefficient this is. Yes. I hope for better days for the chicken. Okay, speaking of bad days, if you are
especially because we know that they only live 42 days. I didn't know that the chicken lived only 42 days. And if you just leave your chicken outside, it will live around 7 years. Yeah. And so we have created a system that on average is that they live 42 days. So, that's the other thing I never knew.
Yeah. Awful. So if you're having a bad day, is there a phrase that you tell yourself to, like, okay, get back in the game. Let's get right.
I don't have bad days.
Of course you don't. Of course you don't.
And luckily, I don't have bad hair days either anymore.
I love it. Okay, well, that's your word to yourself. Well, at least I'm not having a bad hair day. Okay, and my last question for you: you are running around. You're super busy. You're flying to South Africa. You're all over the map. You're Sweden. You're China. What is your go-to snack if you don't have time for lunch?
It's a piece of chocolate.
Ooh, yummy. Who can go wrong with that? I always say to people, hey, look, chocolate is my vitamin of
Yeah,
choice.
that's right, exactly. And well, Tony, but then we do Tony Chocoloni, and so it's actually a brand which is brilliant because every piece of chocolate in the world actually has all the chocolate pieces the same size. And what Tony Chocoloni has done, the bigger pieces and smaller pieces, and it actually talks about the inequality of the value chain, where the bigger pieces are all around, who are making all the money, and that actually up with the farmers, and where the real value is being created is actually tiny pieces. And so this is a representation of how we basically need to make sure is that everybody in the value chain gets the fair value out of it. And this is part of the total transformation we also need to do in the plant-based industry, and really make sure is that the fair value is also being given there where it is being created, including, the farmers and all the way upstream.
Yes, and I find, now I have not interviewed that many farmers, but I find that when I do get to talk to people in the sector, the farmer is suffering horribly in the sense
Always.
that they're crippled by debt. There's no way out. Let's be real. Farmers nowadays, if you're successful and you're thriving or you're surviving, it's because you're a huge major corporation. The
Yeah,
actual
indeed.
farmer itself, who isn't a corporation,
Smallhold farmers.
it's awful
Exactly.
for them. Yeah, they need a revised system,
Exactly.
just like the animals
Yeah.
do, just like the food workers do. Kees, I
Exactly.
want to thank you so much. It is now 11 o'clock by you, so I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for coming on the Plant-Based Business Hour today. I have loved having you. I think there's lots that we maybe can help each other with, or at least I hope to help Live Kindly.
Sure.
Let me put it that way. Big supporter, big fan. You don't go away. Everybody else, this is the end of the Plant-Based Business Hour. I will see you next week, and thanks for being vegan. I'm going to